Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the TechFu Lazy Marketing Hour. This is the podcast that brings you deep thinking when it comes to marketing, not just about the mechanics and the operational side and the execution side. We cover that too, but also we want to get you thinking about how your business and how yourself can be changed through the power of marketing. Today, I have with me a slightly smaller panel. We're missing somebody, but we definitely have Simon Hutchings. Hello, Simon. How are you?
I am very well, thank you.
Good. We also, joining Simon, have the fantastic Adam Cockrell. Hello, Adam. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you, and good to be here.
Excellent. But joining us, we have the fantastic, for the second time, Carl Reeder joining us to talk about personal brand. Hello, Carl.
Hey, Al. Hey, Simon. Hey, Adam. Great to be here with you again.
Brilliant. Well, just to acknowledge the missing, the empty seat in the room. Normally, we have the fantastic Rachel not joining us, alas, due to a personal family bereavement, frankly. She's unable to be with us today, and we send her our love, of course. And it's kind of ironic that today is International Women's Day, and I've done what I thought I wouldn't do, but Carl, you mentioned a word at the beginning, and so I've assembled a fantastic manel in the language that we've heard exists, a fantastic manel, a male panel on International Women's Day. The universe couldn't make it up, could it? So
and it was my fault, Al, for being out in Saudi when I was due to be on February.
There you go. So before anybody comes at us and has a go, it's not intentional, but it is what it is. And sometimes when life gives you lemons, you've just got to make lemonade. So we've got 4 lemons here. Let's make some amazing marketing lemonade. Let's start talking about personal brand. Now, last time we spoke, Carl, it was so powerful, we had to have you back. So that's a good thing. That means your personal brand is exceptional because people buy from people and people clearly buy you and so much of what you say. Give us an update from personal brand perspective. Where's your thinking at these days? Where do you want to start the conversation? And then we'll, I'm sure, wend our way through.
So that's a really good question because obviously personal branding has been something that's been something that everyone's been told they need to do. And people have tried it. So it's worked for some people. It hasn't worked for some people. And, you know, you just need to open up your social media apps and scroll down and you can see the various attempts at it, good, bad, or ugly. And I'll say ugly, you know, that one's me. That's my selfies. And I do apologize. What I'd like to kick this off with is, and it might be something that we discussed briefly last time, but it's front of mind because it's a question I was asked yesterday. So I was speaking at an event in London yesterday, and I wasn't speaking on personal branding at all, but one of the attendees caught up with me just before my session and said, I've got a question to ask you. What tool do you use? And he was about to carry on. I said, look, forget it. I haven't got a clue. My team do that stuff. He said, no, you're going to know this one. What tool do you use to manage your personal brand? And then he developed on it. He said, I've got a client and I want to know what process they should use. I know what steps they should take. I want to know this. I want to know that. I want to know the nuts and bolts of how I can point them in the right direction to do what you've done. And I explored a bit deeper to understand what do what you've done means. And yeah, he wanted to know how, I guess, I've built what I call the marketing web, which I think we mentioned on last time, of PR and social and speaking and books, you know, the combination of everything coming together. He wanted the toolkit to apply to a blank canvas to make it happen. And what I'd really like to open the discussion with is whether that's actually realistic, whether it's feasible, and then to use a well-known character on LinkedIn's recent comments, a guy called Mike Winnett. That's not his real name, by the way. That's a stage name for his personal brand. But Mike, and Mike is his real name, so I'll keep that bit in there. Mike's comment on personal branding is all about how on earth can you have an authentic personal brand if you're using a personal brand system? So I just wanted to chuck that out there because you guys are the experts around the difference between inspiration and copying, the difference between using a system and overly relying on a crutch, and yeah, just a general chat about the quick fix that everyone's looking for in this world.
Amazing. I love that, and I love the way you ended it. And I'm sure I'm going to go straight to Adam and Simon, but I definitely want to talk about quick fixes. Adam, Simon, any thoughts? How does having a system to build your personal brand not betray the very idea of personal brand? What are your thoughts? Any thoughts?
It's a difficult one. I think Simon's waiting for me to go. I'm waiting for Simon to go. I'm not quite sure. I mean, I think I need to understand a little bit more about what how that tool works, and how it can be systemized.
So Adam, there is no tool, there is no system, and I probably should add some context from my perspective, where I found it very difficult to answer this question, but from a different angle. From my experience, I've just done stuff and seen what works, and if it works, it works, and I do more. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and I do less. Al will know that in January to February 2016, I first met him at a Meet the Journalist event hosted by Bexburn Calendar. And that was part of my test and measure, getting to know journalists and so on. Because I realized that to get PR, I needed to understand what made journalists tick. And obviously that was part of supporting the overall personal brand mission. I could have just relied on Twitter. And that's more than 90% of people do, following journalists on Twitter and understanding what it is they're asking for and trying to help them with journo requests. Most 90% just go to a PR agent. I could just relied on Twitter and been in the top 10%, but actually I kind of took it upon myself to force a meeting with journalists. And it just so happens that 3 out of the 5 panelists are actually friends now. I see them beyond journalists that I would help out, and I see them as good friends. Lizzie, I know, comes from the same area as me. James Hurley, speak on the speaking circuit with him now, and Bex, I helped her out with a piece a little while ago. So we all know each other beyond the, newspaper journalist, personal brand wannabe perspective, and that came about from there. But there was no system for that. There was no blueprint that I used to tell me to do that stuff. People have done it and tried to retrofit a blueprint to offer to others. My belief is that doesn't necessarily work. So let's take this example. I guess I'm throwing my opinion on you, and you were asked for your opinion fresh, but I'm going to throw my opinion on you. And as we know, I'm never knowingly under-opinionated. Al did say earlier that should be my strapline. I could look at Anthony Joshua and look at his training plan. I could look at his diet. I could go to the gym and I could follow all of his combos and training and so on and so forth. Okay, I'll go jab, jab, hook all day long. I could run 20 miles. I ain't going to become a world heavyweight champion. And trying to just replicate what he does isn't necessarily the route to success. Could an adaptation of his route help me? Quite possibly, because I've got a dodgy knee. So if I adapted what he did to take into account the dodgy knee and the fact that probably 5 minutes into his training regime, I'd fall over on the floor, and that would be why I wouldn't become world heavyweight champion, then I've got a bit more chance of success. But actually, I think done for you systems, done for you processes, tools, 5-day workshops and so on might have worked for the person who designed it, might not be the quick fix for you. So there's my controversial statement thrown out there.
Okay, so I'll feedback on thoughts so far. I think these systems can be very useful. My feeling is that social media platforms generally are more weighted in favor of those who are exploiting the algorithms and the systems. So if somebody is a beauty model, and they can pick up on how somebody else is structuring their posts, and the types of posts that they're putting out there, and the type of images and the way that they're posing, and then I think those systems can potentially work in their favor. But you also kind of ask, can you remain authentic in that way? But I trip up a bit on the word authentic, because it can be interpreted in so many different ways, and authenticity could be, it could be that you're posting in this way because that's authentically what you want to post. I don't think we could ever give a true representation of a moment in our lives via a photo and a few words, because it's open to interpretation, and everybody's going to have a different opinion on what you've posted, and nobody's going to fully understand the context within which it was posted. So I think you can only be so authentic. I think what we tend to advise our clients when we're running social media for them is, authenticity inspires trust. The more you can show somebody the behind the scenes, what's going on in your business, the people that you're interacting with, things in your personal life, the more you can create a true authentic picture of who you are, and that will inspire people to know you, like you, and trust you. But as I say, I think social media platforms will probably promote and kind of be weighted in favor of those who are using it in ways that the algorithm favors. So they may end up, if you were to take somebody who's just posting authentically, it might be they gain a lot of followers because, oh, this person is obviously likable, and they have certain things that we like about them, they're a bit different. And equally, somebody else, might not get the same kind of level of engagement and interaction. Somebody who's using a system may get, pushed up in your post feed because of the way they're using the system, but it may be less authentic.
This is really interesting, because I'm reflecting as you say this, Adam, and this is something that's actually impacted me. And I'm going to come back to your point around authenticity, because I think you're absolutely right. Holistic authenticity is impossible because social media is a highlights reel, and we all know that. We don't post the we don't post the pains. We don't necessarily post the mundane. I think that's more to the point. We might post for pains. We certainly don't post for mundane. We don't post those days where we've just vegged out and it's 3:00 in the afternoon. We've not got in the shower yet, and the most we've been able to do, most energy we've had, is to get the remote and turn Netflix on. That stuff doesn't get shared online. So I think you're right about the authenticity isn't complete online. However, there's a different side to the authenticity, which I think is damaging from the social media companies, which is around the algorithm. Because as a writer, one of the most important parts about, I guess, myself, how I communicate, and in turn my integrity, is my style of writing. It's about the tone of voice that I use and so on. And I'm thinking now, and this is a flashback to the old SEO days. We all remember those websites where we would load them with keywords and then possibly make them turn white and so on. And if we were advertising that we were I don't know, a pen manufacturer, you can't see it because it's below the screen, pen manufacturer in Bolton, for example, your first paragraph would be, say, welcome to our pen manufacturer in Bolton, who happens to make pens for people in Bolton as we manufacture them. And you'd constantly play the Google system. That is, from a social media perspective, where you're communicating with a community, that's entirely inauthentic. And I know that it can be weaved in a whole lot better now. But surely there's then a question of whether the social media companies are doing right by the mass market and their end customers who are clicking on the ads, whether they're doing right by them by actually taking what people would want to be authentic and warping it into something that's just been adapted to fudge the system.
I don't think systems like social media platforms are really weighted in favor of authenticity. That's a good parallel you've drawn there, and it's not that we can do better. We can do better with keyword stuffing and more more kind of human-based language, but that's also because the algorithms demand that we do that now.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think it's a little bit tricky, and I think we also, a lot of people will focus on providing value. That's how they're weighted. The social media algorithms are weighted on valuable posts that are backed up by the people by the fact there's a rating system on those posts for engagement, likes, shares, and that's how your content gets shared. So how can you always be authentic if you're having to worry about that system and the rules of that system? And why would I post something about a bad day I'm having unless I can relate that to a situation at work and how that potentially helps somebody?
Yes.
I'm less likely to just simply go, I'm having a bad day today. because I don't see that that's necessarily of any value, but that could be the most authentic thing that I could post.
Oh, you see, this explains exactly why my social media is rubbish now and used to fly a few years ago. So a few years ago, it's just down to graft and speaking to people and being authentic. And now it's a totally different world.
It's a business, isn't it? These systems are businesses, you know, they want you to spend money on advertising and boosting posts. So Google and, you know, or Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, it's all weighted upon, it's a commercialized system. So if you're going to use it, you're really buying into that system.
I've got to dive in. I can't resist anymore. Simon, do you want to preempt me?
You dive and come back. It's fine.
I will. I might not come back. So if I don't come back, come in and rescue me. So the thing is, right, I think about this stuff an awful lot. When it comes to marketing, authenticity is dead. Authenticity, and I said this 3 years ago, authenticity is dead because it's been turned into a formula. And the minute, you know, I think it was, I don't know exactly, so forgive me if I get it wrong, but I think it was whoever wrote the Tao Te Ching, and I want to say it was Lao Tzu. I always get Sun Tzu and Lao Tzu mixed up. One of them wrote The Art of War, one of them wrote the Tao Te Ching, and I think it was Lao Tzu. He said, when you have to write down a law, you have to write it down because it doesn't exist, it's not real. And so the point here is that when you codify something like authenticity, you're codifying it mostly because you want to gamify the hell out of it. And so most people on LinkedIn, on other platforms, what they want to do is game the system and get success. The purpose of those platforms was not set up to allow people to game systems and get success. The purpose of Reid Hoffman has said he set up LinkedIn so that he could refer people in his network. That was what LinkedIn was for. Facebook isn't used today what it was set up for. TikTok, we've seen recently that TikTok have been exposed for having an on fire button that their team can press to send stuff viral. Virality has almost nothing to do with content.
And it's not just TikTok, by the way.
No, it's all of them.
There is another platform that has that fire button that emailed me to ask if I wanted it pressed, if I could do a joint campaign with them. So this happens all over the place. I mean, this happens in lots of different areas. Even in small business, when we ask people for a testimonial, half of the time, what we really want is for them to share that testimonial with their network, because that's going to grow our pipelines. So the thing is this, if authenticity is dead, what's replaced it? Now, in the short term, just going back a little bit, in the short term, the problem with building an authenticity system or a personal brand system is it's a bit like Bruce Lee's experience of martial arts. It's so individual. What works for one could never work for anyone else. And so he created a martial art that was based on using what is useful and discarding what is useless. And he created Jeet Kune Do on the basis of that, where you mix different martial arts. You know, if you're 5'6" and very round like me, well, then you're probably going to want to use wrestling and grappling more. Whereas Adam and Simon are both 6 foot plus. They've got long legs. They're going to use kicking to keep people at range. Everyone favors different approaches. And so the irony of all of this is when it comes to personal brand, stop trying to be anyone else, right? Just do you, because nobody in the world can compete with you at you, right? That's the whole point of personal brand. I love that Jeet Kune Do has been brought up in a conversation about personal brand. And the reason I love it is one of my good friends, Bob Breen, was actually...
I know Bob Breen.
Oh, you know Bobby? Excellent. He
runs the London Martial Arts Centre.
Yeah, so Bob and Judy are good friends of mine and worked with them for years. And he was obviously the founding guru of Jeet Kune Do in the UK, being a student of Dan Inosanto. So I absolutely love that reference, but I actually wanted to call out something else you mentioned, that quote from Lao Tzu, and I might have written it down wrong, but I've tried to write it down as quickly as I could, because I think there's a key learning here for anyone who could be exploring about whether I should buy a course on personal branding or follow a process, or if I should do it myself, or if I should get an advisor. When you have to codify something, it doesn't exist. Did I get that quote roughly correct?
Yes, I'm paraphrasing, but basically says if you have to write a law down, it's not real.
Yes.
Basically, something like that.
And one of the key weaknesses I see, just as an observation of others who attempt to go on a personal branding journey, is that they follow what other people do. So there's a lot of mirroring.
Yes.
It's worked for them,
Yes.
so I'm going to do it. This person over here does lots of selfies, so I'm going to do lots of selfies. And then it starts propagating out, and it then becomes the perception of what the algorithm wants, rather than the fact it's just because everyone's doing it. So that's why you're seeing it. But interestingly with this, it's not just positive activities that get replicated. And I've seen, certainly in my world, so I'm from the accounting world, and if anyone is connected to any accountant on LinkedIn, if you're connected to more than one, the likelihood is that one of them would say that they're not a typical accountant, not a boring accountant. It's almost those who protest too much. And when your personal brand is based on personal statements that you have to codify and make real and put as your headline and your strapline, 9 times out of 10, it's actually just a reflection of what you fear you are, but you don't want to be. So that was a really interesting observation there, but I'm going to dwell on a little bit further, because it led me to think, but first of all, about the mirroring and modeling that people are doing, and are we modeling the right processes? But secondly, are we, even if we do model and it is correct, is it right from a wider, I mean, obviously you say authenticity is dead, I would say authenticity, but is it wide from a wider brand perspective, i.e. what do people say about you when you're not in the room rather than when you're online? Does it work?
That's reputation, and I think there is an element of truth to that. But you're absolutely right with what you say, and I just realised I didn't explain what comes after authenticity, and I think this ties back to the long-term solution here that I advise people on. You know, today I won't name and shame, but somebody who I know and I'm connected to, somebody you know, very successful in their field, have been on TV lots. Which has accelerated their career without any question. They are now selling their system to people, and they're selling their system, which is LinkedIn pods, so you can get engagement, right? It's all false. Obviously, it's false engagement. It's not real engagement, but the numbers look good, so therefore you must be successful, right? So it's all vanity rubbish, right? And it even goes so far as to say you can even use the tools I'm using, where you can totally automate the setting up of LinkedIn pods, and so you don't even have to do anything. You don't even have to log in and like everybody's stuff. It'll just do it for you. Immediately, my opinion of that person has gone off a cliff, because what it tells me is that everything I see is complete BS and just constructed. And this is the problem. And this is where reputation and authenticity collide. And unfortunately, when I say authenticity is dead, I mean that if you're trying to be authentic, you're probably not doing it. If you're trying to be real, you're not being real. And the reality, someone just sent me a chat saying name names. I'm definitely not naming names. I don't wish to have any of my legal friends busier than they are. But the point is, over time, you know, anyone can say anything about who they are and what they do. Anyone can say anything in a point of time. And there's an old saying that bullshit might get you to the top, but it won't keep you there. Because what we're talking about is longevity of brand. It's not difficult to build a personal brand overnight. I guarantee it. If anybody watching this wants to build their personal brand overnight, here's what you do. It's really simple. You go to Trafalgar Square, you climb Nelson's Column naked, and you unfurl a big flag at the top with whatever message. I guarantee you'll be on the news, you'll be on the national, your personal brand will go through the roof. But it's not really sustainable as a personal brand, is it? And so this is the point. What replaces authenticity is service, because you can't BS service. How you really treat people, how you really serve people over time is the true way to measure and test authenticity in whatever form it still exists in. The problem with authenticity, the reason why I say it's dead, is because it's been turned into something that you can spend $19.99, do a course on, and you can be authentic tomorrow. Of course, that's utter drivel, and nobody should buy into that. They buy into it because they've got sales targets and they want to make more money. But the long-term brand damage that does, when I go and look at someone's LinkedIn profile and they're in their 40s and they've only got a job in there that goes back 2 years, my first question is, well, what were you doing for the rest of your life, and why aren't you being transparent about it? The first thing I think is, where were you? Who are you? And I think people are cashing in very short-term money for long-term damage when it comes to personal brand.
Yeah, and this is really interesting now, because there was another situation that I saw about a month ago, and it hit the Times in the end, around personal branding and the risks with this. And again, I'm not going to name names because I understand there was legal action against the Times and various bits and pieces going on. So I can't name names, but I can name my observations from an anonymized perspective, where claims had been made online, slightly exaggerated, etc., and then ultimately it got called out. And what got called out wasn't so much the end result, because the end result was still admirable. And I know I'm being really cryptic here, so please bear with me, but it was the incongruency and the challenges that caused around individuals involved. Yeah, this was the commentary online. It was effectively, can you trust this person anymore? Can you, can you feel comfortable with believing what's said, etc.? And there comes a point when you don't have that honesty, integrity, authenticity, whatever we want to call it. If you don't have that you are who you are approach and that honesty and so on, it can unwind at any point, because we all know the basic rules of when we were children, that you don't lie because A, it's not nice, and B, you can only remember so many lies. And the challenge with social media and the algorithms, as you mentioned, Adam, is the algorithms motivate you to sensationalize, they motivate you to exaggerate, they motivate you to really put on a great veneer. And that's supplemented by our ego that really likes the veneer and the likes and the dopamine hit that comes from all of these posts. And then at some point, you forget where you are on it. I know it's a really cryptic one. I don't say any more because I'm like Hal.
No, don't. I don't want to get dragged into any legal dispute either. But your point is absolutely spot on. The thing about your authenticity and your personal brand, and if anybody listens and takes away one thing from me, it's this: you can't fake it. You are who you are. If you've got a weakness or a strength, it's who you are. If you are a white male like me, or a person of color, a female, somebody who's not got the same levels of privilege that I believe I probably live with, I think those are your advantages in personal brand. And we were talking a little bit about this earlier. You know, it's International Women's Day. No one can realistically change everything about themselves, although you can change an awful lot today. But you are who you are, and as long as you're happy with who you are, that's who you should be. If you're not happy with who you are, you should be happy as who you want to be. Construct your life any way you like. I don't mind. But that's who you are. And that's the personal brand that you have. You can only communicate that and amplify it. If you try and tell a lie and be something you're not, of course it's going to catch up with you. Of course it is. The same thing in business. If you're in business and you lie about what you do, how is it not going to catch up with you?
As Oscar Wilde said, be yourself, everybody else is taken.
Completely. Yeah. You've got to own it. And I referred on the chat before this, so I'm sure the listeners will know that we all mill around talking about what we're going to talk about. And I referred to a book called The Unfair Advantage by a couple of my friends, Ash Ali and Hassan Kuba, where they talk about the fact that everybody has an unfair advantage as well as disadvantages. And this topic of privilege, I'm sure we're not going to go too deep into this, but my eyes were really opened, and it was a third-hand story. So I didn't hear it myself. I heard it from somebody who was at a conference who heard it from somebody else. But the diversity and inclusion speaker was talking and saying, I consider myself privileged. Now, he's a person of color, which sometimes people wouldn't see that. And he's saying, yeah, I've got my privilege. I'm 6'5", and I can walk down an alleyway, and I know that I'm not going to get in anywhere near as much trouble as someone who's 5'2" and 10 stone. So that opened my eyes to the fact that actually privilege, what we could call disadvantage, but also unfair advantage, comes in so many ways beyond what we see.
Especially in personal brand, right? Especially in personal brand.
It's so much beyond what we see as race, gender, class, and the usual suspects. And actually, it's so much more granular than those wide topics as well. But the reality is, we can only control what we can control. We are who we are, and we should make the most of it. We should own who we are. And the most important step that I believe anyone can take, most important tool or process or any of this kind of stuff, is to actually be happy with who you are. Once you got that nailed, personal branding is then quite simple.
Just do you, right? Just literally show up, warts and all. And I think, you know, algorithm be damned. At the end of the day, I probably cared about the algorithm at the beginning of my career because I wanted to grow my career more. I probably cared about the algorithm a bit when I launched my business, but I've long stopped caring about the algorithm. I used to say that the most important al in the world is algorithm. But actually, algorithm be damned, because it doesn't matter what you do. At the end of the day, I said earlier, content is very rarely a determinant of virality, unless you are spending tons of money, or unless you are deeply creative. And most of us are not privileged to have that level of creativity where we can create something so wonderfully unique and fresh and new that people gravitate towards it from a viral perspective. Most of us are not going to go viral in our lives. That's not because we're not worth the going viral. That's nothing. It's nothing to do with us.
Well, it's also a combination of you know, time and effort and money, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you really wanted to create something that had potential of going viral, I'm sure you could, you know, spend some time and some money on it. But
well, like I said, Adam, if I climbed Nelson's column naked with a flag of Tetfu, I guarantee to you I'd get loads of traffic to my website.
Yeah,
and look, some of it might convert.
Yeah, virality is a process, I believe, and some of the best minds work on it, and it works for some and it doesn't work for others. I think there would be a process. I don't know what the process is, but I'm pretty sure there would be a process you could use to get viral, even if it takes 1 million attempts and the millionth one happens to be the one. It's like the monkeys and Shakespeare, isn't it? So, you know, there is a way that you can do it by continually testing and measuring and all of that stuff. But when it comes to personal branding, virality is something completely different in my eyes. Personal branding, from my perspective, if we're to look at what is a personal brand, we tend to only look at it through the lens of social media or potentially through the lens of celebrity. And actually, I believe that we should be looking at personal brand through the lens of parent, child, sibling, friend, colleague, connection on social media, somebody you've seen in the newspaper, etc., etc. We should be looking at it much wider. And Al, I know you mentioned this is partly reputation. Yes, it absolutely is. But I think it encompasses the whole of the online and offline self. And where the incongruency really is a problem, and I don't think it'll impact people by getting them into the Times or anything like this, but where it really does impact people is when someone bumps into you into the street and you're a completely different person to you are online. So you're a really spiky character who trolls online, but you're really nice in the real world, or vice versa. You're really nice and kind and giving online, but actually you don't have time for anyone outside of your keyboard. That's when I see that's where I see the real risk of social media coming out.
No, absolutely. But that's that authenticity thing. If you're one way online, and then when I meet you, you're different, the illusion is shattered. And that's what we're talking about here. Build personal brands. Don't build illusions, because illusions break all the time. And why would you take the risk of building your future? Why would you take the risk of building your income on something that isn't real? I mean, you're asking.
It's tricky though, because I found that despite being authentic as I see it online and on social media, I'll bump into somebody who may have seen a post and their impression will be, I see you've been doing this thing. Obviously, that's what's going on in your world, and these things are happening and those things are happening. And I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of remember that post from 3 months ago where I did that thing, but actually, that was just, there's a context you're not privy to, and then things changed, and I didn't provide loads of updates, but their impression from that one snapshot 3 months ago was, that's Adam, that's his life, that's what's going on. And I've no control over that, really. And actually I found that the more I posted online, the more I was creating these impressions of who I was and what I was like, and I couldn't really control any of those interpretations. The less I posted online, the more authentic I think people connected with me, because they had a smaller impression that was more in-person led, right?
I think that's sorry, go Simon.
I was going to say, the problem with that is that it's totally out of your control, because it's the algorithm that's providing certain posts to certain people based on their usual search and reading habits. So they might only have seen 2 posts from you from the last 3 months that have given them a certain idea about who you are as a person, but because the algorithm didn't think the other posts were, you know, applicable to them, they've just not bothered to show those at all. So, you know, as much as we want to post authentically as possible, it's still not down to us about what that level of authenticity is with regards to the social media platforms that are putting this across. I think there was a point earlier as well. So there's an interview with Ed Sheeran that comes up quite a lot in my feed. I don't know why. There's obviously the algorithm seen something in my reading natures. But he's being interviewed, I think it was by Jonathan Ross actually, and he kind of explains his impression of social media and Instagram particularly. So he kind of like says, yeah, you know, I'm popular, I'm a successful musician. I use Instagram and Reels to promote me as a person, what I'm doing, what performances I've got, what albums I'm working on, what singles I'm working on. Yet he sees what he sees a lot of on social media is, I'm using this as an example because it's an easy one, but maybe a lot of people that are overly made up to some degree. And the only reason why they're really using social media is to seek reassurance and approval from others. So they're kind of offering this smoking mirrors thing, which they think is allowing them to build their personal brand. And this is what we were touching on earlier about, you know, seeing one person online and meeting someone and they're a completely different person. But, you know, that kind of total smoking mirrors to try and game the formula, which games the formula from a social media perspective, but doesn't actually game the formula from building their own personal brand. And like you said earlier, Carl, how long can they keep that up for?
This is it. And I'm really, I'm going to double down first of all on Adam's comment first. In terms of the comments in person, you know, this is something that resonates with me massively, that you would bump into people and, you know, sometimes it's actually quite uncomfortable because somebody you've not met and they know everything about you. And it's quite spooky. And then other times it's somebody you know really well, but they've got a patchy knowledge of you. And you think, oh, hang on, you should know more. I mean, I tend to use it as a catalyst for conversation. It's a great conversation starter, at least. And I also, every time this happens, and it actually, when I'm at an event, it happens really often, but I'm not going to pretend that it happens every single day, because most days I'm completely unsociable. I stay at home. And my missus can't stand my social media, so she don't go through it all the time. But Simon, as you say, it's out of your control. However, with communications, we all know that we can say something that isn't necessarily interpreted as intended as well. So I think there's bits we can control and there's bits we can't control. So we can't control the algorithm side, but one of the things we can control to help reinforce the authenticity and so on is to make sure that what we do and what we share online is as open and as authentic as it can be. So rather than falsifying the CV or blowing our own trumpets or so on, to try and balance it out as much as possible kind of minimizes some of the impact of communication. But then we also need to be mindful that with the old saying of offense is rarely given, but it's taken.
Yeah. Can I just respond to that, Carl? It's you're still cultivating something, aren't you? You know, there's still control involved in that. But then that is also authentic, isn't it? Because I will control what I tell you about me in person, right? Yes. Depending on how well I know you. depending on my own personal filter of whether or not I'm oversharing personal details and whether or not this is an appropriate time to bring that up in conversation. With social media, I've no control over how many people in my network see this. There's going to be people who I have deep personal connections with. There's going to be clients. There's going to be, you know, associates. There's going to be people I met once. There's going to be prospects. So, you know, my most authentic post will still take into consideration the fact that I don't want to share too many personal details. And I admire the people that are brave enough to share really personal details about their journey and things that are going on in their lives. But not all of us will want to do that or feel comfortable doing it. So
and that's a really big one when it comes to the authenticity part, because I had often toyed in the very early days of Twitter about having 2 accounts versus 1 account. And do I have the personal Facebook and the business Facebook and all of this? And I settled on warts and all on 1 account. And I think it was the right choice for me, but I also acknowledge it's not the right choice for others. What happened, what I found was, when I started thinking about these kinds of things, I think I'd published my first book, but I still only had about 900 followers across the board. So it was still friends, family, and a couple of clients. And I found that there was a couple of big issues that really got me to think about how easy is it to manage 2 lives. So the first issue was very simple. Most of us who work with our clients and actually speak to them will have some that we are closer to than others. So there'll be some that we see as customers, and there'll be some that we see as best mates. And you might not be quite at that kind of extreme, but it might be that you see them as valued customers and people that you would hope would attend weddings and funerals. That could be the bandwidth that you've got. But either way, there'll be some that you'd be happy to have on your personal Facebook, and some where you'll be a bit, do I want them to see this stuff? And I got myself thinking, why is there that inherent conflict in my mind? Because not only is there logistical issues of, well, this guy's in my connections and he's connected to this lady who is also a client, but I'm not so connected to, do I accept or not? So there was that minefield to navigate as the traction started going. But secondly, I got myself thinking about why have I got these issues? Why have I got this conflict in my mind about certain people seeing stuff, but other people not seeing stuff? And it reminded me of my fellow business partner, actually, who didn't want a personalized number plate because people would recognize him if he cut them up. To which there's a perfect example: don't cut people up. And that's what got me thinking about, well, actually, that principle applies to personal branding as well. Or should I say online presence, because I think this is wider than branding. Online presence. The only reason why, and Adam, you might be very different, but the only reason why I might want a separate personal and business is because of the fear of being looked down on, the fear of them thinking, what on earth are they doing going out drinking? By the way, I don't drink, but why are they posting these hungover pics? Why are they swearing? Why are they doing this, back me up? And very, very quickly, I just worked out a rule for myself. Don't do anything in public that I wouldn't want broadcast in Times Square, front page of a newspaper, or voiced on a megaphone in a crowded pub. And applying those rules consistently across the board meant that actually I didn't need to worry about different audiences, and I could just truly be myself. So that then propagated into how I turn up, wearing T-shirts and so on, regardless of the event. It propagated into how I speak to people. I try to lead with a friendly approach rather than what some might deem a professional, structured sales approach. I just like to see everyone as potential mates rather than potential customers. And if business comes out of it, amazing. If not, then I've got a new mate. And I just tried to keep that approach across the board, and having it consistent just makes life so much easier, I think. But I'm a simple guy.
Well, you don't have to remember. Oh, sorry, go on, Adam.
Oh, I really like that. This is very interesting to me because I spent my 20s posting all of the crazy escapades I was getting up to on social media, and then as I kind of got a bit older and grew up a bit, I just sort of pulled back from posting on social generally, because my networks on social platforms started to encompass employers and business associates and so on. I'm like, this content really it wasn't probably appropriate to share in the first place regardless. So, but I think I'm now trying to find more of a balance. And I did bring it up last time we had this webinar last time, that, you know, how do you kind of separate those out? And I mean, what you're talking about really is a system, isn't it? You know, it's your own personal system for social media.
Yeah.
Whilst being authentic, you are being authentic. You're choosing behavioral characteristics that you can live by and stand by, that you can genuinely, it's not going to trip yourself up, but you're just saying, this is how I choose to behave in the public realm. So therefore my social presence should replicate that. And I think in that sense, you can then just post personal posts under that rule set, whether it be on Facebook, which is perhaps a bit more personal to you. And if you're kind of B2B, then, you know, that could also be posted on LinkedIn to show the more personal side of you.
Yeah, but do you know what? I think that, yes, it is a process and a system. However, if somebody was to accurately replicate that using all of my metrics and my approach, if I distilled it down to here's the criteria of a post and so on, and creative systems, the reality is that their values and paradigms will be different to mine. And that's where I think the challenges are. So if somebody, let's say we've got somebody who might be inclined to listen to this kind of podcast, because we're not going to get the nicest will in the world. We're not going to get retired people listening to this. We're not going to get young kids listening to this. But we're probably, if we were to create an avatar of who we're getting listening to this, probably somebody who wants to build a personal brand. They've maybe got a consulting or coaching business, as that tends to be aligned with people who want to build personal brands for some reason, and they want to know the magic formula of how to do it. The reality is that there are so many things that are on a spectrum for each of us, such as the cringeworthiness or openness to being overtly salesy. So that impacts the system of whether you put a sales post in once every 3 posts or once every 1,000 posts, or you wait to slide into their DMs, or you wait until you actually bump into them in real life. So that's where I think the systems and processes
kind of fall down.
There's a framework, I guess, that you can use. Yeah. And I think I talked about in the last one about where I retrospectively put in my vision, values, and so on. And there's stuff that I've done that probably could become a framework, but I wouldn't want anyone to copy it, because it probably will be completely wrong, and it's wrong for them, not wrong for me.
Well, you've clearly,
go on, Adam.
Sorry, you've clearly got, you know, your own kind of system, but it allows freedom, I'm assuming, for you to post depending on the situation, and that you can't really replicate for somebody else. You can give them a kind of a set of guidelines, but they'll still need to, and there's going to be resistance. I find resistance is a big part of marketing. Al deals with this day in, day out with clients. Some of us will have bigger resistance to doing some things in marketing than we will in others. And if there is a significant increase in resistance, we're less likely to do that thing. So if your system depends upon, you must do this thing, and I've got big resistance to it, well, that system is not going to work for me.
And this is where bigger businesses should really embrace personal brands, but potentially outside of their business. So the flexibility, you're spot on with that, Adam. And sorry, Simon, if I cut across you on this one, but this was just a light bulb moment of something I need to share. Corporate restrictions over tone of voice, and in particular topics that could be talked about, is really interesting. So I want to talk a little bit about some work that I did with some corporates to kind of sidestep it and allow them to enter the conversations without entering the conversations, because I've got the freedom, if I wanted to, and trust me, I don't, but if I wanted to, I could get off of this call and I could post something truly offensive on every social media platform. Yeah, much like Al said about going viral by being naked and climbing to the top of Nelson's column, I could post something that doesn't require me exposing myself, but being really controversial. It will get likes, it will get comments, but it will go against me, and I could adapt my informal parameters that are within my mind. I could also broaden the scope of what I'd normally talk about. So I wouldn't normally talk too strongly about politics unless something really winds me up. And generally, I'd be tongue-in-cheek about it. So, for instance, I posted about being at the Houses of Parliament, and I joked about rounding up Matt Hancock, Keir Starmer, Sue Gray, and everyone else in the news banging their heads together. I tend to take a bit of a jokey, middle of the ground way of commenting on a wider situation. But I could, if I wanted to, and I absolutely have done, make comments around, when Black Lives Matter. I was able to make comments on all kinds of things, Brexit and so on, because I had that flexibility. But brands can't without a convoluted process. And it amazed me, some of the work I was doing for some quite major, I'm talking global brands that everyone on this call would know, where they couldn't talk about, there's one brand, and it's a brand that everybody would know. I can't say much more than that, but it's more than a household name. You see it every day. They couldn't talk about anything to do with the pandemic. They couldn't refer to the pandemic. But I was able to, and they were able to amplify the content from me based on the fact that I was segueing it in. Similarly, another corporate that not everybody will know, but everybody in the business world would know, wanted to make commentary around Brexit, but they couldn't comment on Brexit because they couldn't be seen to have a political alignment and so on. But they wanted commentary that wasn't politically aligned, but referred to the fact that Brexit could or could not cause challenges. But whatever way it goes out, it causes uncertainty. And their hands were tied with that. So this is, in essence, Adam, you've hit the nail on the head, not just on the system that I had, but actually, let's take it a whole lot wider than this. The power of personal branding for anybody, whether employed, self-employed, whether corporate business, whether charity and so on. It allows you to, as long as you're sensible and you act within reason, and you don't put your foot in any silly holes, which I think we all know we shouldn't do, it allows you to actually say the things that you can't say under your brand's name.
Interesting.
That's interesting. So the value of personal brand by proxy to the corporate brand, I totally get. And I think, the future of corporate brand, and I've been very bullish about this in the past, and I'll say it again because it is controversial, but I believe it's coming. The algorithms are actually destroying corporate brand, because what's happening is companies go on LinkedIn, set up a LinkedIn page, and get very little engagement and reach. And there's a reason for that. The algorithms are weighted against corporate content because they don't want to grow your business for free. They want you to buy ads.
But they also don't add value. They don't add value. Well,
they don't add value. Yeah, they're just mirroring their blog or their Twitter feed, right? So there's no incentive. Now, if they actually did add value, if they took a position, if the company had a personal brand, imagine that. So Gary Vaynerchuk's company has a personal brand. It's Gary V. But that's like he's an exception in a sea of non-exceptions.
I was going to refer to T-Mobile. So I can't think of the guy's name. T-Mobile US. I don't know if he's still there.
The CEO. No, he's not. But the CEO. Yeah. He had a personal Twitter, wasn't he?
He was a phenomenal personal brand who was. He did stuff differently. He tore up the rule book, and that's personal brand. Personal brand isn't going on Canva, putting your face onto a bunch of colourful squares and writing inspirational quotes and then a sales pitch to join my 5-day work. That's not a personal brand. Personal brand was this guy who was clearly a hippie.
A human being. Yeah.
He was, whatever he was a nutcase, but he was a lovable nutcase and he was a human.
And he was a CEO of a major corporation taking complaints. Do you know, I looked into that whole scenario. He was an amazing fellow, actually. He set up a department of 4 people in his office, and he would triage the problems and the questions. So he would get people asking him questions about their mobile phone contract, and it would all get triaged through to support. And that's what personal brand in a business setting looks like. It's somebody brave enough, and often, Carl, I'm sure you've heard of Thomas Power and Penny Power. So Thomas and Penny often talk about the social CEO. And we don't need social CEOs. We need social employees. We need employees who are empowered to evangelize and to grow their personal brands within the corporation. I'm a big advocate of that because I think the best asset of any company is its people, by any stretch of the imagination.
Completely. One word of caution, though, before anyone comments it on any of the feeds this is shared to, we do have to be mindful of the Elon Musk effect.
Well,
and again,
let's look at his personal brand last night, harassing an employee effectively. You know,
But even if we rewind to the pre-Twitter days, and it seems like it's gone a bit crazy post-Twitter, but pre-Twitter, he was smoking a joint on a radio show, and I believe
it was with Joe Rogan, yeah.
And there's been all kinds of stuff that he'd got up to, and that's I guess the reminder that we'd all need as well, that the parameters we put in place personally are there for a reason, not just from a business perspective, but actually as being a parent, as being a child, as being a sibling, etc., etc. Is this what you want everybody in your world to see, not just your shareholders or your employees or your customers?
You said something earlier about I don't want to put anything on the internet that I wouldn't want to be in Times Square. I always, when my son was growing up, I always said to him, never put anything on the internet that you wouldn't want your mum to see.
Yeah.
Or never do anything on the internet that you wouldn't want your mum to see. And in a business setting, it's never do anything that your team wouldn't be proud of. Never do anything that would cause your shareholders to sell. And for better or for worse, Elon is his own mind. And yesterday, I don't know if you've seen.
I haven't, no.
Right. So what happened yesterday is an employee of Twitter tweeted Elon Musk. It's an incredible situation. He tweeted Elon Musk to say, HR can't tell me whether I have a job or not left. Perhaps if this gets retweeted enough times, you'll tell me if I'm still employed. So Elon Musk went at this employee or ex-employee and said, well, what do you do? And the employee stood up what they did. And Elon replied and said, well, can you give me evidence you've actually made a difference? Do you do any work?
Wow.
Or do you just make excuses?
Wow.
Do you just make excuses? And he really went at this employee. It turns out the employee is wheelchair bound and has muscular dystrophy. And probably right now is in a room with 10 lawyers working out exactly how much they're going to sue him for.
Well, you know what happened next? Elon tweeted, sorry, but he's the worst. And then that got about 500,000 views before he then removed his own tweet.
Yes.
I find thoroughly ironic, really, considering the whole approach he's had towards the platform.
But that is who Elon Musk is. I mean, you've got to give the guy credit. At least he's being true to who he is.
Authenticity.
Yeah, it's genuinely authentic. Fair play. Sounds like he's not a great guy to work for.
Sorry to jump in, but if you were a billionaire, wouldn't you not care so much about authenticity?
No, if I was a billionaire, I wouldn't use social media. And so that'd be the first thing. Why would you? Why would you run the risk that so many run of it all falling apart? Because as things grow, you have more challenges. So again, coming back to, I think it was something you said, Simon, but quite a while ago, so I can't segue the exact point that you made. But, for most of us and, 99.99999% of users on social platforms, you might have a couple of snipers, people hidden away who'll take pop shots at you. And they're either people that you've fallen out with years ago or just anonymous trolls, or you've commented on a subject that they don't agree with. So at the moment, it seems to be, trans rights versus transphobia. Previously, Brexit would have been one. There's been all kinds of things that could just get some randomers out, but they're snipers. Over time, that increases. You get more snipers, you get more people, more people holding machetes, and they come at all angles, and they've got one sole purpose, which is to take you down. And as your numbers grow, as your engagement grow, and in turn, if your money grows and so on, there's different reasons why they'll do it, but that stuff increases. If I was a billionaire, would I be on social media? Absolutely not. I'd probably have a dormant account. I would follow my kids and my wife and my parents, and that would be it. There would be no posts, etc.
You'd have a nom de plume. You'd be anonymous on social media. That's what you do.
Exactly. But with Elon, there's a really big lesson that we need to learn from him, which is don't tweet or post in rage, because you can always take a screenshot. And if you've got those snipers and machete guys and so on, and you've got 10 million, 20 million, 100 million followers, or you own a platform, it's not going to go unnoticed.
I think I might be less inclined to worry about other people's opinions, though. I mean, I agree. I probably wouldn't be on social media, but I'd also be thinking, I don't need it to grow my business. I wouldn't have the same fears that a small business owner would have around it, authenticity.
I get the point, and we're gonna have to wrap up after this because, believe it or not, the hour's gone. But I would be on social media if I was a billionaire, because I'd be advancing the things that matter to me at that point in my life. Maybe I'd have a foundation and I want to help people. I think how you'd be on social media would change, but that's because your personal brand would have changed, because ultimately your outlook on life, our outlook on life, and Elon Musk's outlook on life are very, very different, obviously. And the beauty is every single human being that's alive has a totally different outlook on life. And the more of us that bring our unique perspective and self to the conversation, the more rich it all is ultimately. We could, oh my God, but we could go on and on. Clearly,
Hours,
days. This is a topic that would run and run, and there's so much here. Simon, key takeaway for you?
I think, just not feeling like we need to copy other people out there. It's not a rinse and repeat, process. Yes, we can take influence from certain elements that they're producing, but ultimately it's got to be based on your aspirations and the way in which you want to speak to people. Agreed.
Adam, your takeaway?
Synthetic appearance is not sustainable.
Nice.
The answer really always is to be as authentic as you can, and just show up as you.
Love it. Carl, what's your key takeaway?
Don't be a prat. Don't promote employees on social media. Don't post things that are offensive, etc., etc. And to make a more specific comment to follow that up, because I think it needs a bit more context as an actionable tip. I personally would advise against taking the Marmite approach. Some believe that making yourself Marmite is a positive. And if you truly are Marmite, then by all means be Marmite. But if you're not Marmite and you're doing it for the sake of engagement, likes, clicks, and so on, life's too short. People are too friendly. Just be.
I love that. Don't be Marmite for the views.
Absolutely.
Don't be Marmite for the views. I love that. Well, you kind of stole my key takeaway, because I was going to say very similarly. I always use a phrase in business and in marketing, especially. Just don't be a dickhead. But prat was a much nicer word. But what I would say is the most important thing is, and we've been talking about this in human nature and philosophy for millennia, just know yourself. You can't build a personal brand until you know who you are. When you know who you are, just be that. And if you don't know who you are, well, that's the journey you've got to go on to work out who you are, because anything else you're just doing for the lulz, as they used to say back in the 90s. And if you're doing it for the lulz, it's all going to fall over. It's a house of cards. And if you're building your future on a house of cards, good luck. That's it from us this week, this month. My God, I can't believe it's gone so quick. Next one, to offset today's, manner on International Women's Day. It's completely accidental though it was. We're going to have a fantastic wannel. I don't know what that is, but we're going to have a couple of guests who are going to bring, and Rachel will be back as well. But we're going to be looking at how men and women behave differently in marketing and treat marketing differently, and if there is even a difference. So we're going to put that on the table and see what comes out, because I think there is a different way that lots of people behave, and I'm certain that we need more women voices on this fantastic podcast. We've had fantastic views from Rachel, and I have to own up and say I need to own that. We've had one female guest out of 6, and that's not good enough. So next month, I'm going to make amends. I know there's loads of amazing women I know, and we're going to get some of them on the show, and we're going to talk about all of these issues. So until then, it's goodbye from me. It's goodbye from them. Au revoir, everybody.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.